On today's Minute of the Apes, there's so much fun recording with Richard and Sean, and as I tease that the Twitter stuff is there for you, you know what happens right after that?
I'll be there for you.
Thank you for being a friend.
2 years sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape! Exercise with an ape maker, human down. It talks. We are the keepers of the divine balance. It is our only reason for survival. We are determined to know what the apes want, war or peace. The only good human is a dead human!
Hello and welcome to Minute of the Apes, the daily podcast where we break down every minute of the Planet of the Apes movies 1 minute at a time, and we kind of make it into a musical, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can find our tracks on SoundCloud and Bandcamp.
Bandcamp. Wow, we're now sending people to Bandcamp.
And on our MySpace page.
Oh, does anyone even still have a MySpace? Is that even still active?
Does Tom have a MySpace?
I have zero idea. I think Sean's going to go Google that right now.
I'm
Or
just
actually,
going to
sorry, type it in,
myspace.com and boom, a site does pull up.
I think Abby asked me not too long ago if I ever had a MySpace page, and wow, that seems like a complete lifetime ago. Hey, this for everybody, we don't have a Minute of the Apes MySpace page. Don't waste your time going there.
There you go.
Unless we should build
We
one. Should we
could.
build one?
Sean's probably looking at it
I guess it's all about music now.
Yeah, it's really, here was
It used to be way back then, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and for musicianship, I mean, I had those because that was one of the ways to promote yourself. Now you almost have to have a Facebook page with your band on it. So that kind of craziness.
Which band on it?
Put your band on it.
Which band on it?
All singing and MySpace aside, we are on to
Minute
minute 63, Sean.
All right, we start minute 63 with the committee chair saying that the female undoubtedly committed actions against the human race, and ends with the committee chair stating that after its removal, the other apes should be humanely blank. We don't know yet.
All right, let's take a listen to minute 63 of Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
In that she undoubtedly committed actions against the human race of a sort which, if they were to be committed today, would be called atrocities. But would they be so called in 2,000 years' time, when it is alleged that humans will have become dumb brutes with the restricted intelligence of animals? It has been pointed out that what apes will do to humans is no more than what humans are now doing to beasts. Nonetheless, the Commission is sympathetic to Dr. Hustline's conviction that the progeny of these apes could, in centuries to come, prove an increasing threat to the human race, and conceivably end by dominating it. This is a risk we dare not ignore. Therefore, the Commission unanimously recommends that the birth of the female ape's unborn child should be prevented, and that after its prenatal removal, both the male and the female should humanely...
As of minute 63, we have a planet's worth of humans plus 2 living apes, 1 who's pregnant, and 1 dead ape. And again, we're going to start judging future smart apes by today's humanity law.
Yeah, and this becomes what we kind of teased yesterday. This becomes the Zira is the guilty party minute.
The guilty party, even though by their point of view, she hasn't done anything yet because it takes place in the future.
For all the ominous stuff that's being said by the commissioner, by the chairman of the commission, they really don't know how to make this more dramatic. We're just supposed to take the weight of the words on it. Basically, there's a kind of a shot where we go across the commission to kind of focus in on the chairman as he's reading. Then when the chairman references Hastline's conviction, we get to see Hastline kind of nod his head yes. And then when we start to get to the Zira, we see Dixon lean up in his suit, but in his seat, but largely it's just focused on the chairman reading the statement. And I would have liked a little more for as hard of a statement as he's making. I needed something a little bit more juicier in the way this was shot to make me feel, or are we just supposed to be just dry the entire time?
Well, I think that I think that this shot is one of those proofs of the economical
The
manner
speed that
which they
shot
were
it,
trying to accomplish filming this movie. I mean, I agree with you. It all fits into what you said about Dixon's reveal. It fits into the entirety of how they got to this place. They are at this point just doing coverage. They are just doing everything they can to get it in the can and make this movie. Overall, when you watch it, it's one of those examples of it plays just fine when you watch it
correct.
through.
Yeah.
But when you watch it minute at a time, it's almost like, hey, there's urgency in this. Why isn't this? And that's kind of why you end up in that situation. But I totally agree with you. So
That's pretty rough. What
Man.
they're suggesting right here for 1973?
Yeah.
Or even for today, it's pretty rough.
So the atrocities of Zira, yada, yada, yada. But the big thing that hits today is they're going to recommend the termination of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how this plays, and forgive my historical ignorance, I don't recall, when was Roe v. Wade decided?
I'll find out. Roe v. Wade was 1973.
All right, so we're a couple of years away from that landmark case.
But the debate probably is in the public conscience because a case does not go to the Supreme Court in that year. It's
Correct.
working its way up there.
Written in 73, the chairman stated that they're in 1973 at the beginning of this statement. So these things, Dane is bringing in a political hot topic
Potato,
at this moment to reference.
But that they're writing 2 years in the future because the movie comes out in 71. So you would think that leading up to Roe v. Wade has not occurred when they shoot this movie.
But surely it's being talked about.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's probably in the
I just
public
want to establish for the listener, we even though we are technically in the movie in 73, this film was probably written in 70, shot, delivered in 71. So you're right. It's being discussed, but it's not even to that state yet.
I mean, are we supposed to be impressed that Dane is fitting in a lot of political topics into one movie, or disappointed that he's not kind of zeroing in on a couple being a focus?
Well, my thought was that I go back to what we were saying so often about the original Planet of the Apes, that when you look at it with the minutia of 1 minute at a time, it was almost like they brought in too many social ideas to where it was just this quagmire of social ideas. I at least think this film is making intelligent decisions when it switches. It becomes, the abuse of testing humans is one thing, but then we get into this, and I think the film rightfully switches where it needs to go. And I think it's exactly what they almost have to discuss.
We're pretty far in to make this directional shift if that's where it's going to go going forward. But I do like this topic because I think it's relevant. It's even still relevant today.
Agreed.
What we're missing is not just the fact that the removal of the unborn child. They're also talking about forced sterilization of Zira and Cornelius so that they cannot have any more children as well. I mean, there's two topics happening right here. Do you think the audience at the time was aghast? Like,
Well, I mean,
what?
you've got to remember 30 minutes ago, we were having musical montages with clothes being tried on and having parties with exercise chairs in it. And now we're talking about abortion and sterilization. Yeah.
But that's the best of science fiction does that for you, where you can take almost lighthearted nature and the simple twist of something, and that convention allows you to go down a path and discuss something that might be harder for an audience to digest in a film that's truthful, that's, an actual depiction of real life. So I think that I don't think this is too hard of a shift. I think it's almost exactly what it has to have happen. I think it's a hard conversation. And to your point, Richard, I wonder, is the audience is probably meant to go, no. Are they thinking no because they like Cornelius and Zira and they don't want their baby to be harmed? Are they able to, is the majority of the audience able to look and say, oh my God, this is what happens when we force termination of a baby? And which side of the argument is he trying to show is right or wrong at this point?
There is something interesting that they're accepting this future, that the commission is moving into this. These apes could, in the centuries to come, prove an increasingly threat to the human race and conceivably end by dominating it. There is this weird, crazy sci-fi aspect of future and traveling to the past and talking apes that the commission is just kind of accepting and moving on from.
That's a good point.
That it's a little hard for me to imagine them jumping to these big conclusions. Hassline, sure.
Should he not therefore interject something that says, if we do not do this? The person posing the hard question, but again, Hassline becomes this weird observer, not really, he has an opinion, but he doesn't really often say what that opinion is to further his ideas.
You're right. It would have been nice because the statement is so wild for a commission with a cardinal on it to make.
Yeah.
You know, a cardinal's going to go, oh, okay.
And it would actually be nice if he came in and said, as much as I understand, it is wrong to terminate a life.
Could you imagine if...
But no, see, he's part of the minority, so he was disagreeing. I see him instead going, God created man in his own image, not the ape in his own image, so we've got to get rid of this, because it's an abomination. They're talking and walking like humans.
That would make sense, too.
But it could have been part of the debate that was earlier. So the statement about, increasing centuries, blah, blah, could have done by Hasline at the beginning of the minute during the argument versus an official statement from the chairman. Imagine going in front of the population going, by the way, these apes are from the future. I mean, does the population know they're from the future? The population just knows they're apenauts.
They're smart ape, yeah.
Right. They're talking apes that
they don't,
travel back. So the commission making the statement would be really shocking to the American public, not even just from the abortion aspect, just the acceptance that apes will dominate the future. And I'd be like, it, I'm not going to recycle anymore. I'm not going to take care of anything.
Doesn't matter.
It's not going to fucking matter.
But see, and then you get into the whole thing. Well, is that why the apes are ruling the world? Because you said it and not doing anything. Had you been a better steward to the planet, maybe the apes wouldn't have taken over.
Right. What's destiny and what's predetermined.
Well, so much of what we're even doing right here, the three of us, would have been nice to have the council doing these things.
The debate.
And even, that's the cool thing when you do that in a sci-fi film is you can have all the characters from different positions state all the things, and all it's really doing to your audience is opening the idea, oh, there's a different idea, and it's just peppering these ideas so they think something different before Hasline slams his hand down and says, we must think about what we're doing, and we must, then he could take charge of it and say what he wants.
Then the chairman can say, the chairman said, let's move forward with the vote. Then you see Dixon move into the room for the reading of just the two decisions.
Agreed.
Because he's not part of the committee.
And you could even almost break the scene, the tension, because you created so much. It's like, the best songs in the world. If you're going to do all these things up here, you have to have a bridge that sort of stops it. They could have all of a sudden, from the chaos of screaming at each other, an orderly goes out and goes, I believe they're ready for you to come in and hear the
decision,
verdict.
The verdict. Yeah, exactly.
That would have brought him in. That would have made sense.
It would have given the tension that we needed for him to his response to.
And we also feel pity for him because we know he loves the apes and he's about to hear something that ain't good.
Yeah.
And it just, here's what I thought about this minute. Dane is so good at introducing these topics. And I do think the further he goes along and with the more time he has, he finds a very compelling way to bring in. Who would have guessed, to your point, Sean, that while we're trying on clothes in a Pretty Woman style, that we would eventually end up talking about the termination of the baby? Who would have thought that's where this film's going? So he very masterfully gets us to this point. I wish Dane, and this is nothing more than wish, I wish he would have been given another 6 months to do one or two more revisions.
Right.
And I bet if he had all these things that we want, he probably would have done. But this feels like a second, third draft of a script. I'd be very curious. I didn't see anything that told me how many drafts he did. So if one of you wonderful listeners knows how many drafts he got done, I'd love to know that.
I had a couple more notes. The committee seems like it whips back and forth in how they feel about the apes. Or, all right, they're a danger. They could be destroying humanity in the future. But then they come back and just say, oh, but in 2,000 years in the future, human beings are no better than dumb animals. So why is that a problem? Because we don't have a problem now, technically, almost exterminating and whole races of animals. But the whole theory that Hasline saying that their progeny could become a threat to the human beings, in the entire history up to this point, the only people that have caused trouble for humanity is humans.
Right.
So humans' own progeny can cause the destruction of Earth, but they're not concerned about that. They're concerned about two apes having one kid could destroy the Earth.
Well, I mean, did the commission hear anything about the plague affecting pets?
Yeah.
I mean, did they hear that statement?
That's true.
That the apes did not do any of that, that the apes were actually subservient and part of all this?
See, this would have been a nice thing. Let's say that instead, if Dixon is a part of listening to this all along, that he stands up, even though he's not supposed to speak, maybe he steps up and makes those opinions. I'm sorry, but by my own accord, humans have done a good enough job to destruct their own species.
Yeah.
Why are we
worried about
a
these
voice
apes?
of reason? And they, gabble, bah, 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 you're not allowed to speak. That we could have created tension.
Would
That
have
would
been really
nice.
good courtroom kind of scene with
Yes,
that.
it was.
The whole breakdown. Yeah.
You just hear somebody yell out, "Was Hitler an ape? Was Mussolini an ape?"
It
No,
always
they were